Hi, I'm John Sove, and this is Art and Design. Today, my guest is John Rowland. John, I am so glad you're here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
John, before I talk about you as an artist, I
Yeah.
do want to ask you a quick question about the John Rowland Studio, or workshop.
Workshop.
Yes. What is the John Rowland Workshop, and how did it get started?
Yeah, well, it's mainly a place where I help other people solve problems, and it revolves around art making. So that can be custom framing, for artists, galleries, and collectors. And, it's fabrication too. It's not just frame making, but I can help artists solve problems and fabricate artwork that they're trying to work out. And so it's just kind of a wide-ranging workshop. That's why I call it a workshop. And I got started out of art school, working in a gallery, Suzanne Hilberry Gallery, and we were seeing really beautiful frames come out of New York, and nobody locally was actually making frames. And to Suzanne's credit, she gave me the opportunity to just try my hand at it. One day I said, I think I can do that, or I can do it better than what we're finding locally. And to her credit, she gave me a Joel Shapiro print that had been sold and said, frame it. And that was it. That was the beginning, and that was, over 30 years ago.
Well, I want to put in a reference point, because when we talk about you creating a frame for the Shapiro print, it's not you calling out to American Frame and getting the dimensions and having it shipped to you.
Right.
You're actually sourcing the wood from a lumber mill.
Yeah.
You're planing the wood. You're taking it down. You're creating it from scratch.
Right.
When we say custom frame,
right.
I'm assuming you don't honor the 75% off at Michael's for these? I just want to be
clear.
No.
Yeah. I mean, that's not, my little niche is not that. It is strictly custom. And, I approach it like furniture, making furniture, So, it's just this all about showcasing the artwork and not overselling the frame, and just doing what's best for the artwork. So it's subservient to the artwork. And, I'm fortunate enough to work with really quality art and beautiful things from talented artists, from all over the world. And so that's really inspiring. And, there's always a problem to solve. I've been doing it for so long, but there's always something new that comes along. And, it's just fascinating.
Well, in the workshop, there's a wood shop, there's a paint shop, you have everything. So it's a pretty good sized space.
Yeah.
And I want to signify that this is actually, it is unbelievable the things that you can create from scratch, which you don't want to distract from the art, but at the same time, it is an art. And I love every one of your pieces. And sometimes people say to you too, because I know there's a couple people that say, hey, you know what? I want this frame to mirror what the work is.
Right.
And they give you carte blanche to use your creativity in there as well.
Yeah. Most of the time it's, okay, I don't want to see the frame. I don't want to notice the frame. I want to see the artwork. And that's totally valid, and I'm perfectly happy doing that. And just proceeding with, trying to craft a nice frame. But there are clients that bring things that are sometimes more unusual and say, look, I want a frame that gets involved with the artwork. And there is a tradition of that, artists collaborating with frame makers going back hundreds of years. And, to pick up something in the artwork and translate it into the frame. And so they have this kind of symbiotic relationship that does both. Hopefully some magic happens. And that's a blast. I love doing that,
Well, you also do a great job with it too.
Wow.
And picking up all the little nuances that reflect that. Now I'm going to switch gears because the John Rowland Workshop is your vocation,
Yeah.
but you're also a full-time artist as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they overlap, and other times your work is born out of some of this stuff.
Right, right.
How does that work?
Well, so yeah, I mean, thankfully, you know, the woodworking business has been very good for quite a few years now, and it keeps me really busy. And I love what I do. I love going to work, but you know, sometimes it's a struggle with deadlines, and so it became hard to find time to make my own work. And one of the ways I started to do that, when things really started to get busy, and this has been going on for a while, this series I think of as Remnants. It's basically leftover material from the woodworking process. And, you know, I think I started back in like 2009 and, you know, struggling with time and figuring out how to make my own work. And, you know, I'm just constantly looking at materials that are left over. You know, from the very beginning, I grab a board from the pile, put it on the saw, cut off the end, you know, and that block of wood, I'm looking at it and thinking, oh man, you know, I mean, that could be something. And so that's the start of a piece. And, you know, I can kind of add things to that, little sticks, you know, extra paint, glue, whatever it is, you know, plexi, glass, there's paper, there's all kind of things that are left over from the framing woodworking process. And I'm essentially a materials guy, a materials and tool guy. That's what I love. Materials have always fascinated me, and tools have always fascinated me. And when those two things come together, you know, I think sometimes magic can happen. And I think of it as alchemy. And so I'm always, and the woodworking process, you know, it's a craft. I know what the end product should be. And it's a struggle to manipulate the materials to get it to that point. But there's no improvisation in that process, really. It's about controlling, and that's what craft is to a large degree, controlling those materials and the tools. So with artwork, for me, it is about improvisation and just having a fascination with the materials and seeing what the tools can do with it. So that's where the artwork comes in, and it just grows from there.
Well, and this is a segue too, grows from there. Your dad passed away, what, 7 years ago?
Yeah.
And he was a maker.
Right.
And he was a traditional Detroit maker in the sense that
Yeah.
he had his own garage.
Yeah.
And if he didn't have a tool, he'd make a tool.
Yeah.
And when you were going through the transition with your dad's life work,
Yeah.
which you grew up with, which
Yeah.
was the inspiration for a lot of things that you do.
That's right.
You had the foresight to take all these tools that he made and do a show for him.
Yeah.
Can you say how that all took place?
Yeah, so after my parents passed away, we were cleaning things out like you do, and I was in the garage, which was a real important place in our world. I mean, he built the garage in 1968, and, you know, that's where everything happened for him. You know, he worked on cars, he was a mechanic by trade, but he was just always making stuff. And from that generation that, you know, made stuff. And if you didn't have something, you made it. And I didn't think anything of it growing up, but that's the way it was. So when I was cleaning out the garage, and I'm looking at all this stuff that, you know, typically would have maybe got thrown away, you know. But I started looking at it as objects and thinking, oh, there's something here. Really. I mean, you take them out of context, out of the garage, and there are these unique handmade objects. And there's a quality about the handmade object that is just special, you know. I mean, there would be things that he made, I don't know. I mean, like he made his own tree pruner, you know. Like, I'm not sure who does that, you know, but
Right.
you know, he was a guy that would do that. And he would take leftover materials, you know, apart from the old camper and an old hacksaw blade, and made this very effective tree pruner that would, you know, hack off a big limb. But it was a beautiful object, and you know, you would never mistake that for a tree pruner that you bought at the hardware store. And so I'm interested in those qualities. When you see an object like that, what makes that, you know, I don't know. It fascinates me.
Well, and then to piggyback on how precise the work you do is, your dad was also a musical instrument maker.
Yeah.
And he had all the
Right.
molds for a guitar or a
Right.
dulcimer.
Yeah, he made instruments. He was a self-taught musician, guitar player. Yeah, so he had these kind of different levels, you know, which, yeah, I'm not sure I have, but, you know, yeah, it's been an inspiration, been a real inspiration. So I keep a lot of those objects around the shop, and yeah.
They're good to reflect from.
Right.
But I want to say that not only did you save these from being discarded, because that's what happens in a moment when everybody's scrambling and there's
Yeah.
a big dramatic change in your life, but you saved them, you preserved them, you made them, presented them as objects. You also put a book together on it. And one of my favorite parts about this is that your daughter actually edited the book.
That's right, yeah.
And through that editing process, because I did talk to her about this on a couple of occasions, she found a new respect for not only you, but for your dad.
Yeah.
And to offer that opportunity and to have kids and everybody involved in it,
Yeah.
it was a great experience. And plus to do that show, to
Yeah.
present your dad's work as well was
Yeah.
incredible. And that, for me, that's an inspiration for others, because we're all going to deal with this at some point if we haven't already. And to have that opportunity to reflect and do it in such a great way with this book, which is amazing, let alone how it was on display. It was an incredible experience.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, having everything photographed. But it was a great process for me and my family. I mean, I turned my workshop into a gallery, basically. You know. I mean, I kind of shut it down for a while and turned it into a gallery. And but it was a workshop / gallery, which was perfect for my dad's stuff, you know. And we had, I call it a party. It was, you know, we had a bluegrass, my buddies who played bluegrass music, we had them there, which my dad would have loved. And, you know, right there at the wood pile, they were playing, and it was great. And it also, you know, served as kind of a wake-up call to my siblings even, who, I'm the youngest, and they grew up with this stuff too, but they, you know, it's like we all just kind of like, yeah, that's what Dad does, and, you know, you don't really pay too much attention to it, and you don't see how special it is. And so they were like, oh, wow, yeah, that is kind of interesting, you know.
Well, and the idea that this transition with your dad moving out and everything else, it goes in waves, and every wave you lose a little bit more unless you're conscientious right from the get-go, which you were.
Yeah.
And it was incredible to see it. It was incredible to watch it transpire into the show that it was. But it's also who you are, and it's a way to, I guess, get like in touch with who you are and what inspired you to be where you're at right now. And I'm taking some liberties with it, but at the same time, I think with our conversations, I feel good taking those liberties. But it was an inspiration. It truly was an inspiration to see all the work that you put into it from there.
Yeah.
But then again, it takes us right back to your work again.
Yeah.
And what direction are you going right now with
Yeah, so it continues with this body of work. I mean, I do other things too, but this body of what I call like remnants, it continues to evolve. I mean, there's just over, I don't know, a couple hundred pieces now, you know. And most recently, just last week, I was gathering some materials up, and I had some leftover sheet metal from which... Another side project I'm doing is restoring a car, and part of the motivation for that was to learn some metalworking. And so I'm doing some sheet metal work, and then I got some material in from it for the workshop in a crate, and there was this kind of nice weathered plywood, and so that, I took pieces from that and scrap sheet metal, and I'm putting it together and banging it and improvising with it, and so it continues.
Well, I gotta back you up just a second, because this is the first car you've redone, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I thought it was in pretty good shape when it came in, but you decided to take it right down to the metal. And I've been watching the whole progress of it. It's an MG midget.
Yeah.
You've got it on a spit, which you can rotate it
Yeah.
360
made a
degrees.
rotisserie. Yeah.
And so I know it's part therapy, part interest in seeing this thing through, but because I was there for the first conversations, you've done it right down to the floorboards. It's unbelievable how precise you've made this car, and what a work of art it is. And it's part of your compulsive nature.
I guess.
Oh man,
I guess.
you could be driving it right now.
I know. And it's not going to be on the road this summer, which is killing me, man. But yeah, I mean, you get a sunny day, and I'm thinking, oh man, yeah, I'm a pretty far distance off from driving this thing. But at the same time, I didn't plan on going this far. But at the same time, I just saw the opportunity to figure out the sheet metal thing, and that's a real skill. These guys that do this for a living or whatever, they've got real skills, and it's a whole set of tools, and that's always exciting to me. Oh, I get to buy a new tool,
Right.
And so it's been fun, and it's gonna show itself in the artwork.
Well, and that's what I love most about this, because it is so precise, though. You're taking old metal, in some cases bringing in and introducing a new part that doesn't just fit right on there. It has to be cut, modified, rewelded. It's not like these are just, hey, just slap on a new replacement part, because the changes and the structure and everything else. So that requires you to plenish and make the right bends, and there's so much education that goes into this.
Oh yeah, I'm still learning.
But it's unbelievable.
It's a struggle,
When I see how close these things match, you're learning, but you're obsessive. You are obsessive. You realize that, right?
I guess I am. I
Is
don't
this
think of myself
diagnosed
that way,
or
but
undiagnosed?
It's undiagnosed.
It is so beautiful, though. And then all the extra little tools, you can't tack that outside fender to the inside fender, so there's tools that hold it in place, and it's just so much fun to see all the new things that you uncover every time I walk in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like going to the toy store for me.
It's so
all these
beautiful.
little gizmos, and and then figuring out, okay, I understand this tool is really designed to do this, but then figuring out, oh, what if I take it this way and use this material, and what happens when they meet? That's the magic, right there.
Well, it's great to see that, but then I'm backing up again, because that's what artists do. They come in to see you and they say, John, can you help me with this problem I have? And you're a problem solver. They have a concept, an idea, and they want to make it out of anything, but they approach you to help them create this. In some case, you're making the whole thing too, which you've alluded to it before. You get excited about that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And then I learned things, being pushed in those directions. How do we figure this out, and how do we make this? So it's an ongoing learning process. And then I love the idea that some of that stuff that's left over from their artwork gets recycled into my artwork, and it's all these layers. And that's really fun to see. I'll look at one of my pieces, and there'll be some color in there that was some leftover paint from some project or some other artist, and I'll think, there's, that little connection. I love that.
But that legacy too, I mean, that's what creativity is all about.
Yeah.
And influences.
Right.
So, and boy, talk about influences. On any given week, you've got something really special coming through.
Yeah, that's the other thing, the artwork that's there just to be framed.
And the quality of the artwork.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. We have some great galleries in this area. great
Great
galleries,
collectors.
great collectors, great artists. And so I'll have, any given piece for a couple weeks. And, some of my clients would say longer. But, I can live with that for a couple weeks. And, that's kind of a special opportunity, And then that goes away and something else comes in. So it's this great rotation of
But it's
fabulous
inspiring.
art. Oh yeah, totally. To live with, collectors know this. This special experience it is to live with something that's handmade by somebody who, is a gifted person. I mean, that object has, qualities that you don't get in any other way.
Well, and one of the other things, because we talk about the workshop and woodworking, we're really close to Cranbrook, and you have a lot of dealings with Cranbrook, but also the history of Cranbrook and the history of Eames and
Yeah.
Knoll and all these great furniture manufacturers that were just down the
Right.
road. And a lot of that work comes through. And over the years, you've collected a lot of that work as well.
Yeah, years ago when I was in college, I collected mid-century furniture. When I was getting interested in architecture and figuring out all this stuff happened at Cranbrook with these amazing people, Eames and Saarinen and Knoll, and back then, I could go to flea markets and I could find this stuff. That's time has kind of passed, but you don't realize how cutting edge some of that stuff was, with the fiberglass and bending, molded plywood. These were just, young artists at Cranbrook working with tools and materials, doing amazing things. So, our area, this, has a rich history with that furniture and design, and architecture. There's great mid-century architecture here,
Sometimes that's lost, but it's not when you walk in your studio. And that's
Right.
one of the best parts is you look up and you can see some of the chairs and
I'm a sucker for a mid-century chair.
it's so
I
incredible.
have too many chairs. I can't use
There's
them
no
all.
such
But
thing.
I know. So I look at them as sculptures. So yeah, I like to look at them. So they'll be hanging around. Yeah. So.
What's next with you and your artwork?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Recently, I was going through older stuff, and Hill Gallery is doing this show now, this portrait show, and I have a couple self-portraits in this show, and they're old. We're talking more traditional charcoal on paper self-portraits that I did years ago. And it got me connected with all this old work that I've had put away for years. And so I don't know. Not that I'm going to, start doing that, but it was intriguing to me, And I don't know. We'll see how that resurfaces.
So you go back and you pull out these 4 self-portraits from 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. What came back to you at that point?
I don't know. The simple fascination with making marks and, there's, a long tradition, of representational art. Somebody taking a piece of charcoal and a piece of paper and, making a representation drawn from life, from experience. And honestly, so I have been doing a little bit more of that recently after seeing these drawings, because it was real satisfying seeing these drawings. And I've been doing a little bit of drawing in a way that I haven't. I'm always making marks, but like observation and making marks from observation, it's kind of brought back a lot of things. Well, there's just things you realize. And when you're really tuned up, and when an artist is really tuned up for that kind of work, you're seeing things all the time. I'm driving down the road and I'm seeing relationships that I didn't see before, or I wasn't paying attention to. So I'm a believer in, if you are going to be an artist, in learning those skills, you know. And yes, for me, it's been a bit of a lesson. Like, hey, keep in touch with that. Maybe not make that, you know, my everyday effort, but you got to keep in touch with that. And I think those are good skills to have.
Well, what I enjoy most is you got 4 very different approaches to self-portraits.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 2 of them are, I mean, I did piles back then, like as a student, I think, really, on newsprint, like the cheapest paper I could get and a piece of charcoal. And I'd do them like real fast, you know, and they're self-portraits because here I am, you know, I've got myself in a mirror. And I was kind of interested in doing figurative work or just learning that. So I did piles, and they were done real fast, some of these within minutes. And then there's a couple others that, you know, one of them's pastel on canvas, and that, you know, was a little more involved, you know. I don't know how long it took. I don't remember, but I spent some time on that one. So yeah, there's a range there.
Well, and then of course they're framed really well.
Yeah, so framing my own stuff, that was fun.
But going back, looking at that, and then going in the direction you're at, it's all these relationships. And
Yeah.
everything's about relationships, problem
Yeah.
solving,
Yeah.
and doing what you really love.
Yeah, and the materials, you know. I mean, I still look forward to getting to the shop every morning and getting my hands dirty and
Like you did this
like
morning.
I did this morning, and I see I've got some white paint on my finger already,
And
and a little bit of sawdust.
the best part is I finally got you in here. And John, I'm so happy to
Yeah.
have you on the Art and Design Show,
Yeah,
just
I'm-
giving you an overview of,
Yeah,
and it's just scratching the surface of all the things that you do on any given day. But I'm really glad you're here.
Well,
Thanks for coming in.
thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Cool.